thank you everybody for coming. My name's Maxine Bowler. I'm going to be chairing the meeting. I'm from Sheffield. I'm in the Sheffield SWP. I'm the Vice President of the Trade Union Council and I'm the co-convener of Stand Up to Racism. And I'm really pleased you're all here today. And this is a panel discussion that we're going to have, which is from strikes to Starmer, how can the left build after Corbyn? I want to welcome our first speaker, who is Ken Loach. I don't think anybody needs to introduce Ken, because everybody knows that Ken is the most fantastic radical filmmaker, and I'd like you to give him a big round of applause.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks very much, everybody. Great pleasure to be here. And hello to the 400 we can't see, but I hope you can hear us and hope you'll be joining into the discussion later on. To begin at the beginning. And I'd like to try and put a framework, just a basic framework on how the discussion might go. It's probably the biggest question we face collectively, is how we respond to the catastrophe that is befalling people in our society, and the catastrophe in what's happened but could happen to the left. Despite the fact that in many respects we've never been stronger. Well, to begin at the beginning, Corbyn's election put the wind up not only the Tories, not only the right wing of the Labour Party, put the wind up the ruling class and its state and all its embedded vested interests, because he proposed a programme that would have seriously cut back the power of the big corporations to make profits out of our public services, out of the utilities, by taking them back into public ownership. And many the transport as well. So some areas would have been ruled out for their profits. Also, they would have challenged the NATO and the West's alliances, and that would have had if they'd carried through that policy, that would have seriously undermined the whole NATO program, or the possibility for like the intervention in Ukraine. So they wouldn't have that. And also, they promised, Corbyn's group promised that they would have a foreign policy based on universal human rights and the rule of law, and would have recognized the state of Palestine. Well, clearly that would have upset a lot of people on the Labour right. So put all that together, and it was clear that he would not be allowed to gain power or any significant power. And it resulted in what we all know. Peter Oborn called it the political assassination of Corbyn. And it raises many questions. The biggest question it raises, I think, that because he nearly won in 2017, and that's when they really stepped up the attack. The question it raises, and I think it's almost beyond this meeting, is it possible to elect a government of the left that will seriously challenge and reform, structurally change our economy and the ownership of the major utilities and maybe the leading companies, the leading industries? Is it possible that that we can make that change through Parliament? It's a question that has bedeviled the left. The best of the three Miliband's, Ralph, said it was an illusion that people had of the Labour Party, and maybe he was right. But I think that's a huge question, and I think maybe we should remember it, but maybe park it for this meeting, because I think it has to be in our mind. But now we're talking about how we organize, and bearing that in that's what happened. Now how do we move on? And I think in some respects, well, first of all, to talk about the Labour Party, I think what is clear is that Starmer now has it by the throat. And you daren't breathe any sense of opposition without Starmer and his clique kick you out. And those members who stay in, and particularly those MPs who stay in, their presence is their silence is the price of their presence in the party. Their silence. And it's, while it's a position I can understand, I can't agree with it, because we're not in a position where we can look forward to decades of struggle. We know the situation we're in is very urgent. And for a politician, particularly a senior politician, to say, I'm going to bide my time and wait till there's an opportunity. Well, Starmer has the bureaucracy tied up. Starmer has the selection of candidates tied up. There's no prospect of a left movement in the Parliamentary Labour Party because they will never get into the shortlist. We see what happened to Jamie Driscoll. Sorry for my part in that, by the way. Wasn't my fault, but they come for me from time to time. So just staying in the Labour Party, to me, is not an option. But I have good friends who have stayed, and respect to them. But for a senior politician to stay silent for probably years ahead just seems to me a price too high to pay. But just think of the opportunity we have. To begin with, the 500,000 or so people who either joined Labour or actively supported his election, based on the main principles, on the programme that he had, we are still here. They are all still here. And there will be 500,000 or more. And it's clear when something like enough is announced, immediately people sign up. And the party itself, the Labour Party itself, went from 200,000 plus to 600,000. So people are still there. And the situation impels people to take that position. Because just think, we know the collapse in the health service. We know that is collapsing in front of our eyes. Every family has a story about that. We know the issues with schools and school buildings and teachers. An atrocious situation. We know the problems of homelessness. People staying at home much longer, sofa surfing, on the streets, whatever. A huge housing crisis. Neglected areas, many areas of we've been working in one for the last few years, the Northeast. Desperate situation where the old industries are gone, and of course the market will never look to need, it will only look to profit, and so the areas remain without investment, without jobs, many people there without hope. We know the drive to war. And that's frightening. That's frightening. We know the environmental crisis, and I worry for my grandchildren and with the world that they will inherit. We know the migration that's going to cause, with the floods, with the heat. The crisis facing people is everywhere, and people can see it. And the political choices they have are two parties that you can barely put a cigarette paper between them. And that's their crisis. And their crisis is collapsing. They cannot solve it. And so, of course, what do? They swing to the right. That is what they've always done. And however far right they think it needs, that's where they go, because they're fascists at heart. So that's our danger, but it's also our opportunity. So we have various choices. Now, people have spoken of a new party, and in many respects, I wish I could advocate that wholeheartedly, because What would be better than to start with a clean sheet of paper and say, right, this is what we need. This is what the situation demands. Let's do it. My fear, given the media we have, and while we can get so far with social media, I think we can only get so far. We saw what the mass media did to Corbyn. My fear is that a new party, without the support of the unions, would struggle, will struggle really very, they will find it very difficult. It'll be a tough struggle. Because it would need an infrastructure, it needs organizers, and it's got to move fast. My thought that I think has more chance of building a base is that we unite on principles. We don't, I mean, I've got friends, good comrades in some of the new parties that are set up. Many friends here, I know, and comrades and people we worked together over many years, and pleased to do so, and with mutual respect. But I think to weld all that into one party to make a serious challenge within a year at an election is an aim that is just too high. I think that there are building blocks to get there. And my suggestion, such as it is that we unite on principles. We unite on the public ownership of health, education, again, kicking out the subcontractors, the private deals with the health companies, all that stops. The renationalization, if you like, of the health service. Taking transport, an integrated transport system into public ownership. Public ownership of water, electricity, gas, energy, the whole caboodle, so that then we can begin to solve the climate crisis, because we can deal with how we produce energy collectively. On all the utilities, all the services back under public ownership. We re-establish the welfare state. We take care of the most vulnerable people. We end, and this is something called Starmer won't commit to, won't even talk about because of the hostile press he'll get. We will end the financial sanctions on people in desperate need that are driven to hunger. And the only thing I was going to quote, which you've probably seen, for which in relating to hunger and poverty, is I think yesterday, the Trussell Trust gave a report. Guess how many people, now in food insecurity? 1 in 7 adults in food insecurity. Over 11 million people, 11 million people can't eat unless we put an extra tin in a collecting box of the supermarket. I mean, what kind of country have we reached when that is allowed? And also the report said that 1 in 4 of people from an ethnic minority group experienced food insecurity. 1 in 4, a quarter. A quarter. I mean, what an extraordinary, I mean, I'm old now, but to think, I mean, I grew up after the war. I mean, we didn't have much, but my God, the idea that people would go without food is extraordinary. And it's used as a weapon. Hunger is a weapon, because they know exactly what they're doing. They're not, if they say, oh dear, we made a mistake. No, they know what they're doing. Hunger is a weapon. You do exactly what we say. You go to the job we tell you, no matter the level of exploitation. You do it. Otherwise you starve. And Starmer's complicit in that too. So that has huge resonance, that issue for us. So we have all those needs that will go unmet. We talked about the new party. So I think that these are the principles: public ownership, full trade union rights from day one of going to work, attack the gig economy, because job insecurity often matches food insecurity, and people that live in anxiety, in hardship, and we know the consequences for mental illness and the rest. So full trade union rights, a full council housing programme. I mean, that was one of the better propositions from the Corbyn leadership. Massive house building programme. I was just council housing, and go back to Nye Bevan's idea, direct labour, so that building workers, they don't have insecurity, but they are hired directly by the local municipalities. That principle. And of course, I mean, there are many. We can write them on the back of an envelope, most of this. But the climate issue, a really Green New Deal that matches the dangers that we face. A foreign policy, an ethical foreign policy based on human rights and the rule of law. I think if we united on those principles, whichever party we're in, whatever our background, whatever our campaign, we can all unite on that. That's what defines us. That is our politics. It's a new society built on the power of the people, the interests of the people, and a determination to rebuild society that will serve our interests without compromise. And we have the chance to do that now, to write that out. And we don't have to give up our different organizations, because they'll have good people in and they'll do great work. But let's begin with that unity across all the left. And many in the unions will join with us. And we can have a huge grassroots movement. And that's the building block, because it'll get to a point where those demands have no political representation and mass support. And that's our hope. And I think we can do it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for that, Ken. Our second speaker today is Lucy Williams. She is an independent councillor from Liverpool. She's one of the 3 people who were elected in May against the Starmer Labour government, and she's an RCN member as well. So welcome to Lucy.
Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. My name's Lucy Williams, and I'm a councillor for the Liverpool Independent Party in Liverpool, an RCN member and steward, and a specialist nurse in palliative and end-of-life care. I think the number of people here today speaks volumes about where we're at as a society. We're all here because we want change. Please bear with me. I haven't done anything like this before. Any sensible person wouldn't choose to be sat next to Ken Loach and be stood in front of 700 people. So I just want to tell our story of what happened in Liverpool this year. A bit of background. I come from a really left-wing family. My dad, Ray, was an icon in the trade union movement. He was the president of the NGA and GPMU. He's remembered for his work supporting the unemployed, the Stockport messenger dispute, and the miners' strikes in North Wales. He'd be so proud seeing me here today. My uncle was the great Bernie Grant. One of the first Black MPs and a trailblazer. As you can imagine, our family get-togethers weren't exactly relaxing. It was full of debate, a lot of laughs, and we spent a lot of time putting the world to rights. I guess I didn't really have much choice but to enter the world of socialism. It's in the blood, isn't it? And we've still got a job to get done. I'm from Garston, a ward in South Liverpool, and in the local elections this year, we kicked Labour out. It was seen as one of the safest seats in Liverpool, but we got 46% of the vote. Liverpool is the epitome of a Labour stronghold. The city bleeds red. And since '97, all the city's MPs have been Labour, and the Labour Party have dominated the council as well. Sadly, the Labour Council don't repay the city in kind, and for the last 5 years, it's been overshadowed by scandal, and now we've been taken over by Tory commissioners. It's a disgrace. The Liverpool Community Independent Party came into existence when 7 Labour rebels crossed the floor, when they wouldn't vote with the whip against cuts in the city. Voters picked up on all this chaos, and in May we removed Labour from Garston after 20 years. And me, Sam Gorst and Alan Gibbons were the first independents in 50 years to be elected. We made history. Alan got 77% of the vote in Orrell Park in North Liverpool. This is a huge Labour heartland. But what was sad was, with more foot soldiers, we could have got another 2 seats. But sadly, the left didn't show up. Our campaign was a bumpy road. We were intimidated by Labour, subjected to smear campaigns, harassment, bullying, and dishonesty. Labour had dozens of party members out walking the streets every night for weeks leading up to the election in Garston. But we still won. It didn't make any difference. Me and Sam, my comrade, we both live in Garston. Our kids go to school in Garston. We use the local services. We work there. We talk to people. It wasn't a political stepping stone for us. We do care. The community weren't soft. They seen through what Labour were trying to do. And now we need the left to unite. We know they're there. We saw it with Corbyn, but sadly not in our campaign. We've got to get to the nitty-gritty grassroots of our communities across the country if we are to fight against the Tories and hold Starmer to account. We need to be visible, we need to be a voice, and we've got to earn the respect and solidarity of our residents. We need to put in the graft. We've got to encourage community figures and leaders to join us. We need to spread the message that the society that we're living in is not normal. It's not okay. They're being neglected. So many people have accepted it because they think this is the norm. It's all they've ever known. Sometimes we can get a bit of criticism and we can be accused of being too idealistic, living in a dreamland where everyone dances in fields of organic kale and sings Kumbaya. But let me tell you, public opinion of us is changing. We are the hope. There's been a managed decline in areas across Liverpool, including Garston. An incompetent Labour council has welcomed in Tory commissioners with welcome arms. This is being replicated across the country. Huge communities have been cut off from health centres, from pharmacists. There's poor public transport, cuts to services, no community hubs. Global corporate companies are towering over communities like Garston with no accountability. Their HGVs are driving through our estates, and in one case in Garston, over a child. This is not acceptable. I live in one of the most deprived areas in the UK, and I see the daily effect of this Tory shit show. I see patients dying in poverty, late cancer diagnoses because they couldn't afford to attend their nearest GP surgery because their old surgery has closed. There's people dying in hospital before they've even been diagnosed because they couldn't get a GP appointment. I've nursed patients during COVID whilst the Tories partied and the public clapped. This is one of the richest countries in the world. But you know what, comrades? You know all of this already. We need to be optimistic. There is a feeling in the air in Liverpool that things are changing. And this needs to be replicated nationally. We must put up a real fight against these Tories and possibly a right-wing Starmer government. The spotlight's on us. Change is possible. We've done it. We need to be present. We need to be everywhere in our communities. We need to organise. We need to build at a grassroots level. At a national level, we need to infiltrate the unions. That's how we can challenge Starmer. The unions are there for the workers, so the workers need to be the unions. Pat Cullen didn't get it right, did she? But nurses have still got a fight in them, and we can build on that. Who would have thought that socialists would defeat Labour in Liverpool? Of all places, anything is possible. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Lucy. That's fantastic. And we wish you luck in the future. So our third speaker is Joseph Choonara. He's the branch secretary of the UCU in Leicester, who obviously have been involved in disputes, and he's also on the Central Committee of the Socialist Workers' Party. So a big round of applause for Joseph.
Thanks. It's a great honour to be on a platform with Lucy and also with Ken. And I should say, when I was a very young child, my mum was obsessed with getting me to watch a film called Kes, and all I wanted was to watch Star Wars. So there's a lot of trauma here, but I later came to recognise the importance of Ken's body of work, and Ken's been discussing retiring from filmmaking. I think we should acknowledge the wonderful body of radical filmmaking. I've still not seen Kaz, by the way. Yeah. I want to make a couple of points about the left that we need to build, and none of this diminishes what Ken says about unity. I'm happy to link arms with Ken, with Lucy, with everyone in this room and everyone in this audience to fight for the kind of things he demands. I want to make a couple of points about the challenges that we face. And the first one is reflected in the growth of the Marxism Festival. The event this year is, well, hundreds, probably over 1,000 bigger than recent years. And there's a reason for that. And it's not just people have come to hear Ken and Lucy and myself talk. It's that people are desperate for answers, because you see a world going to hell in a handcart. Britain is the 5th richest country on the planet. People in my workplace, in a university, are dependent on food banks, are living in poverty. And it's by no means the worst. You only have to look at the ecological crisis, which is not just a threat for 10, 20 years in the future. Today, there is catastrophic flooding, there are wildfires, there are famines breaking out, there is dire poverty, and the people fleeing from this poverty, fleeing from the wars that we generate, are turned away, are drowned in the Mediterranean, are sent to Rwanda, and all the rest of it from this barbaric barbaric government. That's the scale of the challenge that we face. And alongside the ecological crisis, we have the economic crisis of capitalism, the cost of living crisis, which is bad in Britain, but in areas of the global south is a crisis that is bringing carnage and mass starvation. We can look at the political crisis, the geopolitical crisis, the imperialist clashes that are taking place, and we can look at the rise of the radical right, which is horrifying. In Italy, 100 years after the March on Rome, we have a genuine fascist as prime minister, and even in France, where you've seen a magnificent rebellion by workers in recent weeks, one of the biggest strike waves in France since 1968. You see the realities of racism in the face of Marine Le Pen, who retains massive support in France. And now, with the outbreak of rioting in Paris, there's a real test, and I would add this to the list of things that Ken said we have to unify around. One of the central things we have to unify around is the fight against racism and fascism. I'll tell you why. Anyone who thinks that class struggle alone will do away with racism, look at France today, where the police can kill a young black person. But now we're seeing the rebellion in France, and the test for everyone on the left in France is not just, did you build the strike movement? The test is, are you going to persuade some of those people from the strike movement to go out into the suburbs of Paris, stand shoulder to shoulder with black and Arab youth, fighting against the oppression of the French state, fighting against that racism? Can you connect the struggles? I want to talk about two more challenges we face. The first, it continues the theme of the class struggle. With the collapse of Corbynism, one of the bright lights, really, in the past year has been the return of the strike movement. It's the only thing that's really kept us going in this very, very bleak time. We are now seeing a wave of strike action at the highest level of sustained industrial action since the 1980s. That's a really important development, but I think it's not enough for the left simply to celebrate that struggle. I know when Mick Lynch started calling strikes and there were strikes in the Royal Mail, the instinct was just, this is just a huge relief. It's a relief to see working class people standing on picket lines, fighting against everything that's been done to them. But we have to understand as well the tensions and challenges in that movement. Lucy alluded to it in the Royal College of Nurses. The attempt to drive through a rotten deal by the leadership of the RCN to shut down and end that dispute. And it's no coincidence that they've now lost the turnout and the reballot, yet loads of nurses clearly want to strike. Were it not for the anti-union laws, they would have won that ballot. Why aren't they saying we should reballot every single NHS trust individually and see who we can pull out on strike? In my own union, the UCU, the University Lecturers and Professional Services Workers Union, a terrible attempt to sell out our dispute. And we had to organise a rebellion at grassroots level to challenge the leadership of our union. And this is what we're up against. You look at the Royal Mail, a huge battle over the deal that they're trying to put through to end the dispute for a rotten deal that simply doesn't address the kind of grievances that workers have after 20 years of declining wages, growing inequality, everything we had to put up with during the pandemic. And so we have to talk about as a left how we organise at the base of the unions to challenge these sellouts, the betrayals, to advance the movement and to begin to bring about independent rank and file organisation at some level within the union movement. And I want to say one of the things that I think we should all unite around on the left is the attempt to build on the 23rd of September, the Workers' Summit. This is a chance to talk about how our movement can do better, how we can build at the grassroots level, and how we can challenge the attempts to shut down our action by too many of our union leaders. So that's one of the challenges we face. The final point I want to raise is to unpark, I suppose, the question that Ken Loach posed in his talk. Is it possible to elect a government that can transform capitalism? I think that's a really important question to ask, because the question of political organisation is rising up the agenda. And we know that Starmer isn't the answer to this. I mean, if Starmer's your answer, we're asking a very weird question, in my view. We know that the establishment turned on and sought to destroy Corbynism. We know that the lies about anti-Semitism are just that, they're lies. The lies directed to towards Ken Loach are an absolute smear and a disgrace, and we should reject them. We know now that Labour under Starmer is no home for left-wing people. I know good people who stayed in the Labour Party, but I would say this, for those people, you need to think, is this the place you want to stay now? Is this a home for you? There's so much going on, there's struggle outside of the Labour Party. Is this the vehicle for your aspirations? And I would say Labour cannot be that vehicle. There is every possibility at the next general election that Corbyn and Abbott will stand as independents. I would welcome that. And we in the Socialist Workers' Party, of course, will campaign for victory by Corbyn, Abbott, and anyone else who stands as a genuine socialist independent against the Labour Party. We welcome those challenges and we welcome the way that Corbynism puts socialism back on the agenda for thousands of people. But we have to understand that the goal of the left is not simply to recreate Corbynism or Labourism in any form. We have to talk about this for two reasons. First of all, Corbynism was double-edged. It was brilliant to see the breakthrough of Corbynism. But I think to too great an extent, the rise of Corbynism absorbed the vitality, the creativity of our brilliant movement into the structures of the Labour Party and into this institutional battle inside the Labour Party and the electoral system. And I think we can't limit ourselves to that institutional battle within Labourism and within the parliamentary arena. The second thing that is related to that is that to take head on Ken's question, yes, a left government could get elected. You look at Greece. Syriza was every bit as radical as Corbyn when it was breaking through as an electoral force in Greece. The problem is what happens when these radical formations get elected. And the British ruling class have made it absolutely clear. There was a serving general who said in the times when Corbyn was standing for election, the British army just wouldn't stand for it. We wouldn't tolerate this. Look at what they did to Liz Truss. Liz Truss wasn't a bastion of the left, but if the bond markets can destroy a grubby Tory administration, which they did, think what they do to a radical left government that sought to bring about real change. And therefore, the route to salvation does not lie purely in Westminster. We have to talk about building a broad social movement based on struggle, resistance, beyond Parliament, and the extra parliamentary struggle has to be central to that. So the argument I would make is this: yes, unity on the left. Yes, unity around those struggles that Ken talked about. Yes, unity around racism. But in the context of that unity, a debate as well about how we do better, how we go beyond a mere parliamentary challenge, and how we begin to build fighting unions that can genuinely reflect the aspiration of the best rank and file fighters within our class. And ultimately, that's a politics that has to begin to talk about how we challenge the structures of capitalism, which are at the root of the deep, profound, multifaceted crisis we all face. We need struggle, but we need to ultimately talk about how we turn that struggle into a fundamental challenge to a barbaric capitalist system. I'll finish there.
Thank you very much for that. Thanks to all of our speakers, they've been fantastic. I'm now going to take some of the people who indicated on speaker slip. I'm going to call you for 3 minutes and somebody with the roving mic will go round. Ryan Tipton is our first speaker, followed by Jane Gwynn.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the three of you for such wonderful speeches. When I was younger, I grew up in a kids' care home, and of course, with the frustration and anger of being in that situation, I looked for hope. And in 2015, it definitely come with Corbyn, as I'm sure we can all agree. So I joined the Labour Party. I become active, and I think Corbyn did offer genuine hope. However, as I started to progress in the party, without me really wanting to, and I even sadly stood for election, you constantly have to put up with oppression. And I mean that whether it be off Starmer or other just neoliberal people. You know, you speak about Palestine, you support Palestine, you're a racist, and they're just constantly, it's just a losing battle every day. And I mean, I'm only 22 now. I know I look older. However, I decided enough was enough and that I had to leave. And for quite a long while, I found that I was politically homeless. However, you know, when Ken just said about a new party, we don't need a new party, because if you only have to look around you, if you want a party that, you know, genuinely stands up for the things that everyone in this room believes in, whether it be climate change, speaking about Palestine, if you genuinely believe in socialism, standing against oppression, and a ground up movement is what we need, and a revolution, then Ken, I think the only thing I can offer you and everyone else in this room is join the Socialist Workers' Party.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jane Gwynn.
I'm a member of the RMT and I work at London Underground. It's really clear, isn't it, the attacks that key workers have found ourselves under, and not just working people, but working class people. Yeah, there's a lot of anger. People are sick of the Tories. People are desperate to do something about it, and there's an election on the horizon. But I agree with Joseph that there's a lot more at stake here than an election. Elections are important, you know, it makes a difference what we do around them, but they are a machine that can suck you in and just take up your energy. And we always have to recognise what is the limits of Parliament. So yeah, a new movement, a coalition between people, yeah, I'm absolutely for that. But it's got to be a lot more than about an election. The debate that we're having at the moment is a debate going across Europe. I often listen to a podcast from Spain at night and they've got the same argument. What should we do about the left here with the fall of Podemos, with the rise of the fascist Vox, you know, beginning to win local elections? What should we do? This is a common theme. With the RMT, we've been involved in two movements over the last sort of decade or so. One was Tusk, Trade Union Socialist Coalition, that looked to organise as an alternative largely during elections. And it brought up some arguments, but where is it? You know, where did it go? And more recently, you know, our General Secretary, Mick Lynch, took a different approach as a much more community-based argument, with the argument about enough is enough, that we need to organise on the streets, that this needs to organise pensioners, it needs to organise people in their communities. But, you know, where's that? So how do you come past some of these pitfalls to build, you know, what we need is like, takes into account that there's election, fights to win strikes, fights against the media. I mean, just again, you know, I'm in a job where we're talking about our pay rise, and straight away they're out now with, oh, inflation. You know, they're not quite bold enough to say it's been caused by workers' demands for a pay rise, but they're adding that in there. You know, those kind of arguments. How do you support that, and how do you support communities? Looking back to what some of I don't say that they failed, but they haven't held or been successful. How do we overcome that and build something which is genuinely rank and file? And I don't just mean at work, but in communities. Thanks.
You will be followed by Joseph Dodo Levin.
We had in Bristol a fundraiser to get money for strikers and young people to come to this event. And as well as great food, we showed the film Land and Freedom, which I want to say is one of the remarkable films I've ever seen. There is a scene in that, Ken, where there's a very sharp debate takes place. It's a brilliant scene about that revolution. Do we go for it or do we hold back? And at one level, it looks like an academic debate. At the end of the film, the people who says we don't go for it turn the guns on, don't they? Because those decisions about what do you do, are you going to fight for fundamental change or are you going to try and tinker, make really big, immediate impacts on what we do or don't do. And I'd recommend everyone to watch that film. And I totally agree. The idea that Labour offers anything when they're going to now expel the guy head of Compass, which is, you know, a mild-mannered janitors organisation, as far as I can see, that's no longer acceptable inside the Labour Party. And I think we have to look at the last year as one of hope in terms of a rising level of working class struggle, a rising level of strikes, but one which has had serious difficulties. The last speaker mentioned enough is enough. In Bristol, we had an Enough is Enough rally, organised in about 4 days. 900 people turned up and probably 400 were turned away. It was brilliant, except nothing else happened. There was a desire for unity in action, and we need unity in action, not unity of the graveyard. Unity in action on the picket lines over climate. And where I live in Bristol, there's a big climate movement. There's now a debate taking place. Should we hitch ourselves to the Greens as a solution? Who's the Labour candidate? Being pulled into the minutiae rather than starting to look at mass mobilisation and challenging. And the last thing I would say, I agree with Joseph. I don't think you can separate. I think you can have unity in action, but I think utterly we absolutely need revolutionary organisation at the heart of that, which has a much bigger picture and understand the past to move forward in the present.
Joseph will be followed by Mark Thomas.
I truly believe that the left is stronger now in the UK than it's actually been for decades. And you see this in polling, you see this whether you poll rent controls, which have a huge majority, wealth taxes, again, a huge majority, nationalisation has a huge majority. And I don't understand why right now there's a belief that we need to step back from electoral challenge. If you have these huge majorities in society that believe in something, then surely they can come together and take state power at the very least, if that's your starting point. And this idea that because Corbynism was defeated, that means that we have to move away from electoral challenge and look at other times of action, I've never quite understood, because it seems that this is the moment when things are changing. And you see this in the fact that actually the cost of living crisis has changed how people are thinking. I think there's a change of consciousness that people don't even realize. And it took a number of years after the financial crash for Jeremy Corbyn and Bernie Sanders to emerge. So I think there is delay. I think we're right at the start of that wave. But I really do not think this is the time to step away from electoral challenge. And I don't know why in the UK, this has happened in the UK in particular after the last 5 years. I almost think that whatever happened during the Corbyn years and how we were defeated, I almost think there's been more of a tragedy in these last 5 years. There's been more of a tragedy in the way that we've lowered our expectations for our society. And I think that if we believe in democracy and we believe in electoralism, there is still a way we can change society quite quickly over the next 10 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark will be followed by Andrea from Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think that if we are, as we all must, seriously thinking about how we reconstruct the left at this moment where you have Starmer's war on the left and moving right, but also a significant revival of working class movement, I think we need to be bold. I mean, the comrade was just raising a question about elections and so on. And I think we do need to think there was a place where, if you like, Corbynism did succeed. Joseph touched on it. If you look at the Syriza movement and Syriza Party, it had a similar program, and when capital attacked it, it had no answer. And I think it reflects the limitations of a purely electoral project, because political power, the real power to confront capital doesn't lie in parliamentary institutions. And therefore, I think we need not just to break from Labour, but to break from the whole tradition of Labourism and an orientation on elections. We need something better than a Labour Party Mark II as our vision. I mean, Ken talked about maybe for the future, the kind of question of a new left organisation, its relationship to the trade unions. And I think that we need to move beyond just thinking of the unions as some singular homogenous organisation. They are places that are contested. And I think we need to rediscover a tradition of understanding and challenging the trade union bureaucracy. Actually, there's a series of films that Ken made, like The Rank and File, about the thin leaf kind of, it's the Pilkington strike, his series on Days of Hope about the run-up to the general strike. And I think the Questions of Leadership, which I think is a documentary series that eventually TV commissioned, but wouldn't show, if I'm right, Ken, about the trade union. But we need to talk about these things again. And I think I share the frustration, to be honest, anger. I feel angry about what happened with Enough is Enough. It was a creation of the CWU leadership to support the strikes. 500,000 people signed up to it. I sat in a hall in Clapham in Southend with 1,500 people. It was, if you want to talk about a moment where they felt like an opportunity, and it was switched off because the leadership didn't want anything that would challenge it, and they went into negotiations. We end up. So I think just relying on the trade union, even the more left-wing parts of the trade union bureaucracy. The final thing I want to say is there's a long tradition in the British working class of separating politics and economics. The unions fight over, wages and conditions. Politics is what the Labour Party does. And I think even on the best part of the Labour left, which supports strikes, like Jeremy Corbyn, which is very welcome, but there's still a tendency of saying that the unions, we will respect the union, in effect, the union leadership's autonomy to conduct a strike. I've been at a number of meetings where Jeremy's been the speaker, for example. He's fantastic, giving people confident strike meetings, this is, raising solidarity. But there's no attempt to say we also need to challenge the strategy of the union leadership of drawing supporters together in a union who understand that, to deliberate on strategy and then fight for it. And I think, therefore, we need a different kind of politics that understands that, yes, we need programs, but also the key engine of social change is struggle, and struggle requires strategy, and it requires drawing supporters together to fight for strategy, questions of oppression, questions of exploitation, and questions of the trade union leaderships. And that's a very different version of politics. That's not just saying, let's look for a vehicle like the Labour Party, but, Labour Party Mark II, we need a radical reconstruction of the left. And I think that involves drawing on the revolutionary socialist tradition to think what that looks like. And that's the task that we're trying to set ourselves in the Socialist Workers' Party.
So, Andrea.
This current Labour Party, the leadership is utterly apolitical. Starmer, Streeting, they do not have a political line they follow. They would go anywhere that would get them into power, and the media would smear and would challenge, as they did. Anybody would challenge the status quo, the Corbynism, for example. So I think that we cannot afford to steer away from parliamentary politics, because the climate crisis, the cost of living crisis, it's very extremely urgent. So we need to be able to exert political influence right away from the government to enable to even to save the planet. So I think that what we need would be an alternative force that would go against the current system of first past the post, and that could challenge and even start discussing proportional representation in this country to make sure that other voices are heard and exert real influence and change people's lives, because it's our lives are at stake, and we cannot afford to wait on that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Lizzie will be our final contributor
in the meeting.
No pressure. First Marxism Festival, everybody. Hello, Ken. Film studies teacher looking for a job.
Also, see me after.
So further to what Andrea just said, I've been living in the Republic of East Oxford for 30 years. Most of you know Oxford, which is very posh, but I live in the Republic of East Oxford, which is a working class area. and it's being aggressively gentrified and suffering from all the usual things that all working class areas are suffering from all over the country. And we've been betrayed by Labour, by the Lib Dems and by the Greens, I'm very sad to say. So last May in the local elections, we put up independents in nearly every ward, as much as we could. And our independents, with 1 month organisation and no funding, no party funding, our independents came second to incumbents or winners. So very, very close seconds. So we did really, really well. So what I wanted to ask the panel, did they think that alongside lobbying for proportional representation, independents as our local and national representatives in Parliament, in representatives, is the way to go, and having a permanent hung Parliament of independents? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'd like to ask their opinion.
Okay, thank you very, very much. There's tons of slips, by the way, and I'm sorry we haven't managed to get everybody in. Just before I bring the speakers back in to sum up, I just want to publicise a few books that are at Bookmarks. There's Oliver Eagleton, The Starmer Project. There's The Revival of Resistance by Mark Thomas, Jessica Walsh and Charlie Kimbrell. I'm sure there's many, many more books, and I have also a few announcements that I want to make. If I can juggle around. Yes, so accept evening session as it will all, accept evening session as it will already be happening. Sorry, the session with Noam Chomsky tonight at 6:30 p.m. has been moved into the Beverage Hall. The Beverage Hall can be found in Senate House, just past the ticket desk and Bookmarks bookshop. And we're delighted that Suetta Kinch, award-winning saxophonist and MC, will be performing at the Mully's Bar tonight. So I'll bring back the speakers, and I'm going to start with Lucy. Yeah.
Oh, what's your name again? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Yes. I think it's the only way we can hold them to account. I think it's the way forward. It's working where we are anyway. Yeah, I don't think there's any point in everyone coming to this festival this weekend and just going home and staying in our comfort zones. I think we need to leave with the mindset of getting into the root of our communities, speaking to people that don't believe in the same ways that we do, people that don't know what a fairer society looks like, encouraging people to join unions, being a voice in local councils, influencing the youth and educating them that where we're at is not normal, it's not acceptable, and it needs to change. We need to empower our young people to make a difference, be leaders, and a voice that people want to listen to. Tomorrow I'm taking my kids to Community Fun Day in Garson, joining the community litter pick. Need to set an example and make this the norm. I'm going to speak to residents tomorrow, listen to their concerns, be their advocate in a Labour council, and start spreading the message that we're living in an unfair and unjust society. Anything's possible. Our election win this year, it happened this year. This is happening now. We are part of the change. And remember, there's more of us than them. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And next, Joseph.
So thanks a lot. Thanks for the discussion. I'll try and be brief because I know you all want to hear what Ken has to say in response to the discussion. Let me just make a couple of points. First of all, I agree very much with the people who spoke about enough is enough and the problems with it. I was in Leicester, where I live. We had a magnificent protest march. It brought together everyone. everyone, striking workers, community activists, the people who run the food banks, anti-racists, climate activists. It felt wonderful. It felt like everything the left should be. And then it was crushed by the trade union bureaucracy. They shut it down. And we have to understand that. We have to understand we're serious about unity. We want unity. But in order to achieve that unity, you have to be able to provide a counter pressure within the unions, within the broader left, to what they're trying to do. And without that, we can't secure the kind of unity that we need. But it showed for a moment the ability to put thousands upon thousands of people on the street and build those kind of movements. Secondly, I want to respond to the points I think Dodo and other people made about elections and electoral works and so on. I'm not saying for a moment that the left shouldn't contest elections. I've done my share of trotting around council estates and having my fingers trapped in letterboxes and bitten by dogs and all the rest of it. I completely support the idea the left might want to stand in elections and use elections as a platform to mount a political challenge and build our movements and so on. What I would contest is the idea, and this is an old argument, that power fundamentally lies within Parliament. I don't think that's true. And that's why I don't think it's sufficient for us to talk about mounting an electoral challenge in order to form a left-wing government, and then from the top down, from the parliamentary pulpit, transforming capitalism. I don't think that's how it works for two fundamental reasons. The first reason, where does power lie in society? Power lies in the boardrooms of the corporations, in the higher echelons of the capitalist class, in the banks, in the corporations, and so on. And unless we challenge that power, we can't bring about fundamental change. Power lies also within the structures of the capitalist state, the unelected structures of the army, the judiciary, the civil service, and so on, which will pose a constant threat against any attempt to challenge the rule of the ruling class unless we confront them. But it's not just because that's where power lies. What we need is a process of revolutionary change that also transforms working class people. You know, we as Marxists are often accused of thinking that working class people are all saints. And working class people aren't saints or devils. The point that we're making is that we have the potential in our class to make ourselves fit to rule and reorganize the world. But we do that through struggle. We do it through creating the kind of mass democratic organs from below that are thrown up in the great revolutionary struggles that challenge the framework of capitalism. So we have to be serious about our end goal. I'm going to finish by asking you to join the Socialist Workers' Party. And that's not because I think a revolution is imminent in the next day or next week or next month. When I joined the Socialist Workers' Party, my district organizer told me, this will all be over in 3 or 4 years. That was, well, Marxism, that was Marxism 1995, I think it was. That turned out to be a huge lie. I'm not saying it's going to be a quick and easy struggle. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that we want to build the kind of organization that can bring about the kind of fundamental change that actually points a way out of the catastrophe that capitalism is drawing us into. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to be simple, but if you agree that that's the challenge that we face as a working class, if you want to bring about that kind of change, please consider joining us, strengthening our organization, helping us to build and draw together the struggles, and helping us to translate those struggles into a challenge to the capitalist system. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. And last but not least, again.
Okay. Thanks very much. I have to say to Joseph, he joined, I was close to a similar party in 1965, and the revolution was just around the corner then. Anyway, the bus went and I'd ridden on it somewhere. Yes, I agree with so much that's been said. And I think there are questions raised that it's valuable to try and and answer. In a way, there's one big one. Why does the Labour Party fail? It was set up to promote workers' interests, set up by the trade unions, which was the organized working class. Why does it fail? Why do union leaders pull the plug on is enough is enough? And why does Mick Lynch, who I have great respect for, he's a great performer, he's been militant, he's led the strikes very well, a lot of respect, I don't know him, but a lot of respect for Mick Lynch, but he doesn't once, and I've listened to him many times, I haven't heard him say the railways need to be back in public ownership and so to be an integrated transport system that serves everyone. I haven't heard that. Now, why not? And the key is one of the two great enemies that working classes faced and been betrayed by for the last century. One was Stalinism, that destroyed the gains of 1917 and turned it into a monstrous bureaucratic dictatorship of immense cruelty. And the other is social democracy. And that's the key enemy that we have to identify. And the flaw with social democracy is that they say, well, yes, we've got to defend workers' interests, but the employer's got to make a profit before you can defend your jobs. If the employer doesn't make a profit, he's out of business, you've got no job. If the employer doesn't make a profit, and he says you've got to work longer hours for less pay. Well, of course he's got to make a profit. You depend on him. In fact, you can't have art galleries or concerts or music without corporations pay for it. You can't now have a health service because the corporations have got to help us provide money for it by outsourcing and subcontracting. Social democracy has moved on. As the crisis of capitalism has grown greater, social democracy has stepped in and said, sure, big business has got to help us. You hear Wes Streeting every day going on the private sector. Look to the private sector. When the European Union got together, they were talking about the private sector must help us rebuild Ukraine. Well, they've made enough out of the war already without rebuilding it and making more money. That's the problem. But we're still left with the problem. We still left with the problem of how do we move forward this week, next month. Starmer and his clique expect us to be fragmented. They depend on us being fragmented. They depend on our sectarianism. And we've got to show that we can unite. We've got to show it. Because otherwise, we go to meetings like this, everyone makes a great speech, and the danger is, as you said, Lucy, we go home, wow, that was good. Go to the next meeting, and nothing fundamentally changes. And I say, when I grew up in the 60s, there were three fine Trotskyist parties, and I was close to one. And I'll tell you a story about sectarianism. I had a great friend, Paul Foote. We were students together. Wonderful man, great journalist, lovely, fine human being. I was connected to one of the other Trotskyist groups, and we got summoned. But we lived in North London. Our kids used to go and play football on Hampstead Heath, Paul's kids and our kids. And I got summoned one day, and the SWP was International this is for the older comrades. The SWP was called International Socialist then. And they were called in our group as the state caps because they had talking about the Soviet Union as a state capitalist state. And I was summoned and said, what's going on? I said, what do you mean? The boss said, well, your kids are playing football with the state caps. I said, well, they've been playing football, they're kids, what's going on? He said, well, we don't do that. We don't collaborate with the state caps. I mean, stupid. It's stupid. We can see it's stupid. But the consequence was, I didn't stand up on a platform with Paul until there was I forget what it was called now, but the Socialist Alliance or something like that. And in the 90s, and we looked at each other and said, how stupid is this? And the danger we have, we shouldn't underestimate this danger, that we do fragment into, I know there are 1 or 2 new parties set up. And as I said at the beginning, they're good friends, they're good comrades. I like them all. I'd go and support them all. But we have to find a way of building a unity. So the suggestion I made very tentatively, it's not an easy option, because the key thing that we could do if we link at grassroots level, just link, is provide resources, provide position papers, suggest speakers, let one group join another group, hear what another group is doing and copy it. We can be strong that way. If we try and link through setting up a party, we know we'll stay fragmented. But the great thing that we need to promote is that the ideas we put forward, what we'd agree on, what we would unify around, are the great demands. And this is not a soft option. These are against the social democratic idea of working with capitalism. They are saying, we own the health service. It is ours. We own the transport, and we own the major industries when we get to it. And we demand trade union rights right from the beginning. We stand on universal human rights. We will begin from ground zero to tackle the climate change in doing whatever it needs, because that's the imperative. These are not social democrat demands. It means cutting right back the power of capital. And you say, you're not going to make money out of things that we need, out of our essential services. You're not going to determine what is produced, how it's produced, and include the rape of the world's resources. These are not soft demands. And to put those on the table, the program, the policies, the principles, that only those will satisfy the needs of ordinary people, that will give them job security, that will give them a fair wage, a good wage, a real living wage, that won't condemn the most vulnerable people to lives of misery and hardship and hunger, that will give our kids a decent education, and they won't have to pay for it with debts of half at 50, 60,000 pounds when they leave university. I mean, what a appalling thing to do to our young people. And when you're sick, you will be cared for, and you don't have to go out to the private sector, whatever they call it, because they're working with gig economy workers and taking money out of what should go towards our health. All those things, if we put those demands on the table, if we can get a link across all the great things that you're doing in Liverpool, the SWP is doing in places, in its branches, supporting strike action, supporting workers when they take action, doing all we can on all the campaigns, opposing poverty, and all the rest. This is no soft option, but we can do it. And if we build that as a building block, then things will follow afterwards, because we'll have established that link. Every town, every region, every campaign. If we can establish a link like that, that's the rock on which we can build solidarity.